So I've been thinking about Construct for a while and the different parts that allow you to make some really, really fantastic games. What happens if we took all of those objects away and we just had one object? If we had a single object, can we still make a game? That's the question I want to try and answer today. So I've been thinking about this a little bit already before starting this video, and I want to set up some ground rules. So the first thing is behaviors cannot be disabled and enabled. This might seem like a weird rule to have, but actually it means that we can have infinite possibilities with just a single sprite. So I've got an example here. I've got sprites and the behaviors it's got is solid, platform, and scroll to. And I've got just to check to see if I've toggled on an instance variable or an instance boolean called floor. And if it's floor, it changes the properties of it. This means with a single sprite, I'm able to have a platformer and a floor underneath, which kind of defeats the purpose of only using one object. So behaviors cannot be disabled and re-enabled using trickeries with instance variables. If I insert a new object, you also see that we have 3D shapes, 3D cameras, we've got buttons, we've got tile backgrounds, text. So I actually want to stop myself using any of those either and actually just use a single object. This includes any input devices for this challenge as well. Just using a single sprite and nothing else. So is it possible? Let's find out. So my first thoughts with this is a platform game is out the window. A puzzle game might work, a top-down game might work as well, but there's nothing to interact with in the top-down game. There's no walls that's going to stop the player, nothing for the player to find because they're the only sprite. So definitely need a bit of thinking with this. After a bit of thinking, I think I've got an idea. So I'm going to take and get a brand new sprite, and I'm going to call this player, and it's going to be my only sprite that I'm allowed access to. Now, in terms of what it's going to look like, I'm just going to take my regular icon that I use and import that in. I'm also going to add a second animation to this, and I'm going to import the green variant of my sprite as well. And this just gives me two sprites to flick between, or just simply two color variations. And I could use effects to achieve the same sort of thing. So I'm not classing this too much as cheating. I think if I was using completely two different animated sprites, then I would class that a little bit cheating. So I'm going to resize this down and place it in my level. I'm going to take a second one, and I'm going to set the animation to animation 2. Now I need to be able to tell these apart inside of the code on which is the left and which is the right. So in order to do this, I'm just going to set up a simple instance boolean. So I'm going to call this player1 and press OK. So it's going to start as false, and I'm just going to tick this on for this one only. This means I can tell the part between them. Now, I don't want to do too much of the cheating that I showed at the start, so I want to do something slightly different. So my plan for this is I'm going to add in the 8 directions behavior. Now, with this put on, I'll be able to move both players at the exact same time, like so. What I want to do as a bit of a challenge is try and get these two to touch each other. So let's do another behavior and let's bound this to the layout. And I also don't like the rotation, so I'm just going to take this rotation and just turn it off for now. So now we want the two players to touch each other, which I guess with bound to layout makes this quite easy. So let's switch that instead. And instead of bound to layout, let's use wrap instead. This means that now if I go off the screen, we'll appear on the opposite side, like so. Now currently this is not possible to touch the other player in any way whatsoever. Those two players will never touch each other because they're moving at the same rate at the same time. And this is where being able to tell the difference comes in handy. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our player and we're going to do a quick check. Is Boolean variable set player1 and I actually want to invert this and check for our green player, because our green player is going to be the one on the right hand side every single time. And what we're going to do is then take our player and we're going to change a couple of its properties. I'm going to do set max speed, and let's take this to be random for now. Let's go 100 to 1000, like so. And is there any other stats we can play around with? I think that might be the only one I want to set for now. So let's test this. So I'm slowly gaining on it and gaining on the player. But it's not a very fun game. Currently, it's just a case of holding down one key. So this idea might need to go back to the drawing board a little bit. So after a lot of time thinking actually of what I could do, I think I might have an idea. And actually we're going to go back to adding what I said we're probably not going to make, and that's a platform game. I'm going to take the platform behavior, and I'm also going to add a second behavior, and that is going to be destroy outside of layout. Now what I'm thinking is make it so the player can infinitely jump, and I just have to time it so the player can always stay on the screen. So to do this, we're going to first add a jump sustain. So if we hold down a button for amount of time, we're able to jump a little bit higher, and we're going to put the jump strength up to, let's do 1000 for now. We might need some testing. So what we're going to do is do a check. I'm going to say player, and then is jumping, and then what we're going to do is reset the double jump every single time. And we just need to make sure that we can double jump. Let's try this. Not quite. I guess the problem is we're not got a platform to land on to begin with. So let's see what settings we can play around with. Instead of checking if they're jumping, let's just check if they're not on the floor. I'll test this and come back to you. Okay, so I've got it working now. Only thing that I didn't do was actually turn on double jumping, so I can reset the double jump. So if we test it now, you'll see that I'm able to hit the up key, which is already built in. I don't need to add the keyboard object, and our player jumps and keeps jumping. Now, again, not really a game because I just have to press the up key every so often. It's not really difficult, so we want to add a little bit of a challenge now. So I was thinking some ways that I could add a challenge to this game. One of them is obviously increasing the jump strength each time, so you've got a smaller window of opportunity. We'd also increase gravity, but none of them I think really screams to the player, this is clear. I want to make it really clear, and I can't use any text or anything to make it clear. So what I'm thinking instead is we do a quick check to see if they're jumping. So is jumping, this will be any time they hit the jump key. And I want to take the player and I want to actually set the size of the player. So set size, just missed it there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the player's width, I'm going to times it by 1.1, and player's height. Now with this, every single time the player will get bigger, which means it's going to be harder to keep them on the screen. We test again. Oh, this is going to need some testing. So let's make sure that this is only being triggered once while true. And let's see if that fixes it. There we go, that's better. And this also adds that sort of punishment for jumping. Now the jump sustain doesn't really work the way I want it to, but that's fine. And now I've got to be really precise. Doesn't really work, so our center point stays the same. back to the drawing board, I think. Okay, after a little bit of testing, what I found works better is actually changing the timescale instead. This makes the game faster and the player appear heavier over time. So it has a similar sort of effect to the gravity. I'm also upping it only every second instead of upping it when the player jumps. This means that you can't abuse any of the jump sustain, and it also means that if you do choose to use the jump sustain instead, where you hold it down instead of tapping each time, it's just another way that you can play the game. So you can hold it down or you can tap, and now I'm off the screen. So I think final thing I want to do with this to really finish this game is start by changing the viewport size. So I'm actually going to flip the numbers around. So I'm going to make this 480 by 854. And I'm going to take these two values and also change the layout to be the same. And this just means it makes a bit more sense, a bit more mobile game. I also want to change just the background color to make a little bit more sense. So I'm going to take this and make this, let's take this and make this quite a light blue. And then what we're going to do is every second we can actually change the color to be darker. So I'll set this up and then we'll see how it looks. Okay, after a bit of playing around, this is what I've got so far. So I've got a blue value that I've added as a variable, and we subtract 3 from it each time. And then I just set the background to 0, 0, and then the blue value. To get a better effect, I should probably add some stuff to the other two channels, just so it's not such a dark blue color. But for now it works, so let's test it. So as I'm tapping, I can hold it down if I prefer. I'm trying to keep on the stage. Now the longer this goes on, the blue will start to get darker, and as well my character will feel a lot more heavier as the timescale gets faster and faster. So I'm seeing this already. I'm having to tap a little bit more to stay at the top of the screen. And so far so good. And the screen's starting to get darker, so it's getting faster. And you see one mistake, I fall right down and I've lost. So I think we've got about a working game. I think the final thing I want to do is sort the background color out just to be a little bit more clearer, so it's not just so dark to begin with. So I'll try that and we'll see what it looks like. So this should be our finished and final project now. So you see that I've set up color channels for the 3 different colors. So I've got red set to 160, green to 255, and blue to 255. Actually make green and red go down slightly quicker, so we can still get more of that blue to give that sort of sky feel. One of the things I did spot that some of you might have spotted already is the timer was actually a little bit of a problem, because as the game gets faster, as I increase the time scale, 1 second is no longer 1 second, which means these values increase and change much faster. So this was a bit of flaw in the design, and it meant that the game felt really, really easy, and then suddenly a huge difficulty curve came out of nowhere. So to fix this, I'm not 100% sure if this does fix it properly, but I've got the timer set to a variable, and every time I increase the time scale, I'm increasing the timer by 1.1, which is the same as what my time scale currently is at. So let's do one final test. So it starts off white, and then as the game goes on, we should be starting to get a little bit of blue in. And again, it's getting heavier and heavier to hold my character in. And I fell off because I am rubbish. So you'll see as the game keeps going, the background will change color and get darker and darker. So still some things to play around with this to make it the best sort of possible sort of final result. But I think this is proof that you can create a game with just using a single object inside of Construct 3. If you'd like to play this game for yourself and see if you're any better than me, there'll be a download in the description, and see if you can create a game using only one sprite. Finally, if you've got any challenges inside of Construct you'd like to have for me as a challenge, sort of give a go, please let me know. Put your comments down below. I look forward to hearing some of your crazy challenges, and we'll give them a go. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.